Ready to run, Candela? Let's go behind the screen and talk about your Lightkeeper, the Game Master.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Bards and Barrels. I'm Phil Boone.
And I'm Ross Druce.
This is part 5 of our 10-part deep dive into Darrington Press's horror system, Candela Obscura.
Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button to catch all the other parts of the series, as well as our podcast, where we really take a deeper dive into all this. I do want to make one note before we start this episode. I am not just wearing polka dots. These are Iron Man's arc reactors. So before we get anybody in the comment going, why are you wearing polka dots on
I can attest. They are not all circular. I can see the difference.
It's fine. Anyway, Phil, can you believe that we're halfway done with the series already? It doesn't feel like it.
It's a little surprising, actually. I feel like we're halfway through, and there's so many things we've yet to cover.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's
We
what's
haven't
crazy.
even got to playing yet.
No.
I mean, we're going to get into some of that today. It's going to be from the GM side of things.
Yep.
We'll talk about players playing from the player perspective here in a couple weeks after we do the deep dive on the podcast about GMing. So, but let's get started. Let's talk about the GM's role in Candela Obscura.
Ooh, the GM's role. So I thankfully have had the privilege of being able to fill that role before, and it's not that different. I'll throw that out there, that you are still a facilitator of the story, pseudo referee at times if you must be, but your goal is not to kill the characters. You mean
You still enjoy it if it happens, right?
Not intentionally, right? Like, you are creating dangerous situations, and you are definitely, it's likely going to happen. But you're not like, don't be that guy.
You're not rooting for somebody's death.
No. Exactly. It kind of dampens the storytelling experience if you're just out there,
Yeah, for sure. But I see where you're going. So, like, comparing it to D&D is like you're in a lot of ways the narrator of the story. You're the one that's like saying what comes next, what happens, and you're not the adversary. That's the key point here. Is you're
Correct.
not the enemy at the table.
And you're not the only narrator, right? When we play this game, so you have all of the clues, right? In essence, like, the end game, but everyone that's sitting at your table gets to be a narrator. And I think that is one of the fun parts of Candela. So your job, right? You help set the tone, right? What does this assignment that we're going to go on look like, right? As the GM, how am I going to make sure that, we start with this scene and then we kind of amp that pressure up and we start to kind of build the scene out and start to apply tension in the assignment.
Yeah. So let's start with that. How does the GM create the horror? And I think a lot of that starts with pacing and urgency in these.
Yes. One of the things too Ross is also running a Curse of Strahd campaign for some of us right now in the D&D space, and the pacing, I feel like, is one of those components that happens in that potential campaign and that style too, of just
Sure. Yep.
some of it's a slow build, kind of, in essence, and some of those instances that I think kind of spill back over into Candela are, flashes of, hey, you met Strahd and you didn't know it, right? Like, little things like that can kind of come up in Candela too, where maybe you actually encounter the phenomenon early on, but you don't have enough clues, right? Or maybe you haven't gotten far enough into your investigation to actually realize that that's what you're dealing with. So some of that pacing, as far as, it is a game of discovery. It is a game of investigation. You have to figure out the clues in order to get to the end game, is a big part of that.
For sure. So actually, Phil, I think a way a GM can look at this is like, think of like horror movies that you've seen. Like, it works in a lot of the same way. And I think you did an excellent job talking about slow burns and build up. The thing you also have to throw in there, if you're thinking about horror movies, is jump scares. So it's like that pacing really is like, you have some pieces that are long and drawn out because that's the mystery part of this, but then also the jump scares to keep the tension high and keep the players on the edge of their seat.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I think some of the other ways, right, that we can look at maybe kind of creating that horror, that tension type of thing too, not giving away too much information.
Totally. Yeah. Well, you want to let something stew, right? So if they want to know something, don't just give it to them outright. Make them work for it a little bit.
sometimes it's hard, right? As the GM, just like thinking through, you have all the information, and in order for them to succeed, right, they need the information, but it truly is it's an investigative game, right? So they have to work for that. You don't just want to freely give all of the information out, or you're taking away from the story
Sure.
when you do that. And it's this weird juxtaposition of like, well, the information is part of the story. Well, yes, it is, but their character development is also a part of this story. So you need to let them develop as characters, investigating and turning those leaves over, right? And figuring out what the storyline is, and maybe uncovering something that you as the GM didn't even plan.
Right. Totally. And I think another way you can do this is let there be silence in your game. I was a broadcast major in college, so it's like dead air is awful to me. I hate it when there's dead air because it's like this tension. You're like, oh my god, that should not be there. That's exactly what you want to create. Like if they come to a realization about something, or if something just happens, like let them just sit there and think about it for a second.
As a GM or DM, this is something that I've had to learn. That's a challenging thing for me, especially. But watching it play out in Candela, especially, is it is so worth learning that skill of just letting that hang out there. And even if the characters don't know what they're doing or what they're going to do, you can watch it across their faces of like, okay, they're thinking of all of the potential things that they should do, right?
Totally.
And
Yes.
someone will break that silence.
Oh,
It doesn't
absolutely.
need to be
Yes.
you as the GM. Someone will, and wait it out because it's worth it.
Actually, quite often it's probably better that you aren't the one that breaks the silence.
It is.
Because that's letting the story carry the load. Like you're not trying to push it forward, then it just naturally moves forward.
It ties into that, don't give away too much information,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you break that silence, you're probably going to influence what happens next, and you don't want that to. You want your characters to do that.
Totally. And I do struggle with that as a DM in Dungeons and Dragons as well. I think that's a hard thing for any game master, unless you've been doing it for a long time, to really become an expert at. It takes a lot of time, like playing with your characters, knowing that they're going to step up and break the silence, and you gotta get out of your own way sometimes.
It's also understanding, right, that silence doesn't mean that you didn't give enough information. Sometimes silence means they're processing.
Totally.
Right.
Yes.
And that's like that. You kind of have to switch the way you look at that in your brain.
Yep, 100%. So let's focus in on tension a little bit, because that's another tool. And the interesting thing in Candela about tension is because you're not rolling as much, you can almost create tension by calling for a roll.
Yeah. Because I know the stakes matter.
Yes.
Right. In
100%.
essence, like if you have to roll your dice, something bad might happen to you.
Yep.
Actually, it's highly likely that something bad might happen to you.
Totally. Well, to the opposite side of that is not calling for a roll, because if they do something expecting you to say, well, you need to roll a nerve for that, and you don't, then in your brain the stakes are not as high as maybe what you thought they were, or maybe you're in a better position of advantage than you thought maybe you were.
That's true. I'm just thinking too, as the GM, that maybe there's some, long-term impacts of what you're doing, that what you're doing right now isn't necessarily that big.
Sure,
but it's
absolutely.
a domino, right, potentially,
Totally.
that you knock over. So it can still help build the tension in that way too, of like, oh, I expected, and now like I'm nervous that I didn't have to roll. Like what did I not
Sure.
do?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's super effective, just kind of managing when you do and don't call for rolls.
Totally. And I think part of this too is like just a general mechanic of Candela Obscura is that you give your players more information when they roll, so they can be strategic about how they want to roll, because there are things you can do. We'll get into that more next week, when we start talking about playing from the player perspective. But like, you need to tell your players that, okay, they've done something, you've called for a roll. Now this is high risk, medium risk, low risk. So it's like there's a certain tension with that too, is like once you call for the roll, they don't know at what level what they're doing is until you tell them,
Yes.
or how dangerous the situation is.
Correct. Right. Like what, is it worth it? Kind of in a
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
so I explain what I want to do as a player character. The GM says, yeah, you can do that, and it's going to be a high stakes roll. Oh, I might is sort of want to change my mind, right? And the thing about you building a shared narrative is, okay, well, what's the next thing that your character might do, or how do you think you're going to get yourself out of this situation, or how are you going to lower the stakes, right? Like you have some different options, And in a group storytelling game, what you say initially doesn't have to be the final answer.
Totally.
Right? That's why we talk about, okay, it's going to be high stakes. And then you can decide, yep, here's what I'm going to use to try to make this roll. And then the roll proceeds. It's not ever just like a, hey, we're going to roll real quick. Oh, by the way, it's high risk, but you're locked into this roll.
Right.
It's not designed to be like that.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit now about like what happens after the roll. So this is interesting too, because like if you roll however many dice you're rolling on this, you roll your drive and you get a 6. 6 is a success on any of your dice. So that means you get what you want. If you roll 2 6s, then you get your success plus something else. And that's kind of really the boring part if you give them what they want. Because in this game, failures mean more, and failures mean more flavor.
Yeah. 6 is really your only like true success, right? The failing forward component comes anywhere below that. So on a 4 or 5, it's considered a mixed success. So you get what you want, but there's a consequence or a complication. And we'll get into some more details about that probably in the podcast or maybe next week when we're talking about playing on the playing side of it. But a 1 to a 3 is a failure. But a 1 to a 3 can't necessarily stop the story from moving forward, right? You have to get these investigators to an endpoint. So you can't just like cut them off from information or whatever that is. So this is where something may come into play where, you know what, maybe you're trying to catch someone that's running away from you. They do escape. You see where they're going, right? Or they hop on a bus and you catch the license plate number, right? Or something like that.
Yep.
In the meantime, you're so stressed out about losing them that you take a brain mark, right? You're actually going to take a little bit of damage in essence because you're stressed out that you lost them. So there's a consequence, but not enough to where you've completely lost them, right? There's still a chance that you can track them down and catch them. It's just not going to be as easy as it was before. So it is making sure the story can continue to move forward.
Right. And it's interesting because if a lot of you are out there have played Dungeons and Dragons, successes and failures tend to be black and white. Like you set the challenge rating for something, and let's say it's a 10. So you either roll above the 10 and you succeed at it, or you roll below the 10 and you fail at it, more or less. And then you have crit success, and crit fail on that, right? It actually would be more fun. So here's a tip that's not even related to Candela, is if you would implement something like this in Dungeons and Dragons. So your DC on that half is a success, but the level of success depends on where you roll in that. A lot of people don't play that way. It's either succeed or fail. It would be kind of fun to do that. It may be a little bit more work in D&D, maybe, but it's an interesting way to like add flavor because it's not just straightforward black and white.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And depending on how long you've been DMing too, it's just like kind of a natural thing that you could add in that shouldn't take that much additional.
Totally.
I think.
Well, let's talk about every DM/GM's favorite thing, and that's prep. What is prep like for Candela Obscura, Phil?
Oh, well, it depends who you are as a person. But as a general rule of thumb, right? Candela is meant to be light prep, but your assignments typically are rooted in very strong themes. So yes, I have an idea, right, of kind of what the threat is. I have some clues that they could potentially use to figure out what the threat is, and then somehow it's going to resolve itself. But as long as you have built out strong themes, so I don't know which one of our episodes we're going to talk about, like getting into themes a little more, but having that outlined and then just truly like a couple points, right? Because the characters, it's just as much about their growth as it is about actually accomplishing the assignment. So I say light prep. I've also written a couple assignments, and that is heavier prep because you're kind of actually writing a lot of that stuff out. But you can get away for the most part with not actually doing that much and trusting your players. I mean, they're gonna investigate in the way that they're going to investigate, and you just get to be a part of that story.
Absolutely. I mean, that's true for any dungeon master or game master. I feel like it's like you're following their lead in a lot of ways, and you have to be willing to be flexible and adjust to that as you go.
Yeah, Ross has been doing this a lot in our normal D&D
And
campaign.
that's fine. It's fun. I think it's a lot of fun. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Bards and Barrels. We'll be back next week on the podcast to dive even deeper in the game master's role in Candela Obscura. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can catch all the things we've been talking about. We'd also love to have you join us on our social channels as well: Facebook, Threads, Instagram, at Bards and Barrels. Until next time, may your dice be hot and your beer be cold.